Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our Communo Member Insights series. Today we have Claire Bourgeois. She is a photographer and she is the owner of Uncommon Originals. She is a freelance photographer. She does portraits, she does lifestyle photos, she does events, and she does content strategy. So she really does do it all. So today she's going to talk to you about how you can harness FOMO with photography to gain clients. Which is a really interesting topic. And I mean, pictures are taken every day. So I think that we can all learn from this. So Claire, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. Just I'm excited, a little nervous. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. I am going to jump off, but and give the floor to you. But before I do, I just want to advise everyone to use the chat feature and interact as much as possible. And we're going to have a Q&A at the end. So ask all your questions here, and Claire is going to be more than happy to answer them at the end.
Yeah, right, totally.
Awesome. Good luck.
Thank you. Thanks, Denon. Okay, hey everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this webinar. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about my experiences as a content specialist, working kind of with one foot in the world of marketing and one foot in the world of photography, and how you can kind of approach your choices to imagery through a very marketing specific lens, and really encourage people to get very excited about what you're doing and use a little bit of that FOMO to sell whatever it is that you have to offer. So before we do, Denon gave me a little quick introduction, but I thought I'd go a little more in depth. As you know, my name is Claire, and I work in a bunch of different realms, kind of all around content, and I'm very passionate about storytelling. So I have been a photographer for the last 8 to 10 years, kind of working with a lot of different organizations, groups, festivals, a lot in the arts, but also a lot with kind of different brands and lifestyle. But also lately, kind of in the last 5 years, have been moving more towards kind of content strategy as a content specialist and helping brands tell a story, not just through photography, but figuring out where different things like copy and content and brand strategy can fit into this. I work with a lot of events and festivals, or I did before COVID and hopefully will again. I think my biggest kind of passion is really just getting people, bringing people together and building community through really great content. So before we kind of go into some more photography, and I'm going to show you guys kind of a lot of examples that are some of my own work, along with some of the different things that I've learned through the years, I want to talk a little bit about FOMO. So FOMO, as I'm sure you guys have probably heard this term, it's like a very millennial term, but it basically means, it stands for the fear of missing out. And I wanted to talk to you guys about this today because I myself am from what we could call the FOMO generation, in the sense that I kind of grew up around was in high school as social media was beginning to take off. I was kind of the perfect age to begin to feel a lot of stress and pressure based on what I saw my friends were doing online, what I saw brands that I followed, artists and musicians and celebrities were doing online, and really always kind of grew up with this intense desire to belong. That was really amplified by the presence of social media in kind of the digital landscape. I think that is kind of a sense that's growing more and more amongst people, especially young people. And as marketers, we can kind of utilize this as a tool to kind of get people involved. And I know that FOMO, you might hear that and think of kind of manipulation and say like, oh, you're just trying to manipulate people into getting involved in what you're doing. Whereas I want to kind of flip that and say more from the lens of community building. People will never really come together, especially for kind of things like events, unless they feel like they might be missing out on something great. And our job as marketers is to show them exactly what they might be missing if they don't get involved. So I really, for FOMO and kind of why that works as a marketing tool is because as we've learned through kind of this COVID social distancing mess, social interaction is basically a human need, right? And this desire to belong, to find our tribe, to kind of find the people that we really get us and to feel like we belong to that community is something that we all, I think, innately, no matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, is something that that we all want to be a part of. So these are kind of, as a photographer and as a marketer, we can kind of tailor our content strategy to really fall back on this kind of human quality of FOMO and really like get people excited about what we're doing and encourage people to jump on board so that they don't miss out. So when it comes to choosing content, and can kind of go for photography is what I'm really going to talk about today, but it also ties to video. It also ties to the copy choices and kind of the story that you tell. But we really want to kind of consider these 5 core things when we're creating this content strategy. And I'm going to talk a lot about events because that's kind of my experience, but you can take these principles and cover a lot of other aspects of your business, whether you run an agency and you're trying to gain clients, whether you are selling a product or kind of trying to fit a need of something else of your audiences. So these are kind of the 5 things that I'm going to talk about. The first one is to consider your audience. So as basically any marketer who's worth their salt knows, kind of the very first thing that you want to do, no matter what you're trying to promote or how you're going to do it, you need to figure out who exactly you want to reach. So that's kind of based on your objectives, who you're trying to sell to, what needs you want to fit, and you want to really understand the people that you're selling to. So you want to determine them, you want to figure out what their main motivations are, you want to decide, you want to figure out what the kind of need is that they have that you can meet with whatever it is that you're selling, whether you're an agency selling services or an event selling tickets. And you want to then through that show them imagery that they can relate to. So I kind of will always look at the audience that we are trying to attract to an event and try to really get great imagery of people that kind of fit that niche. And we want to showcase that kind of community so people can say, oh, I can see myself in this person. And thirdly, we want to appeal to their natural desire to belong, to say, can't you see yourself here? So can we. So I'm going to show you guys a few examples of some photos that kind of, I think, really fit this kind of audience thing. So as an example, I've worked with, this is kind of one of Calgary's, I'd say, biggest arts and culture festivals that happens every year. And they really kind of put a huge focus on not only being a great time to come and party and hang out with your friends as an adult, but also they offer a great amount of kid programming. And they really want to attract lots of families to come and say, hey, like, you can be a part of this. So as a photographer, as a content specialist, you always want to think about how can I show people who themselves in an image. So choosing kind of family-focused imagery for a family-focused event obviously makes the most sense. If someone's maybe running a startup and you want them to come to your networking event or you want them to be a part of your marketing agency, you want to show them themselves kind of connecting, and you want to show them the connections that they could be making, the legs up that they could be getting for their business, perhaps the investment that they could be finding at these events, and say, like, can't you see yourself here? If you're not here, you might be missing out on these great opportunities. If someone's kind of looking for a really great time, they want to connect with their favorite musician or artist, showing them themselves kind of having this amazing time, this experience is going to help you to sell to them what exactly you want them to believe. The second one, and I think this is probably the most important one, is going to be around showcasing human connection. So for me, when I'm choosing imagery, showing people what you're selling is always great. You know, product pictures or mock-ups or pictures of the performers or the keynote speakers, like that's all well and good. But ultimately, what you're trying to sell to people, especially when you're appealing to their FOMO, is this idea of human connection. And that's all going to be honestly what I think most people are looking for when they're online and they're considering spending their money or making an investment in something. So you want to show real people sharing real experiences. And this is a great opportunity to build community by bringing these people together. And I think that this is probably the most essential human quality, which is connection and our innate desire to connect with one another. So this is a really great example of kind of a weekly event that I've been involved in for a very long time called Rocket for Dollars. And they're a pretty small event that started off with absolutely no funding. It was happening every week just at a local bar, and it started very small. And since they started 5 years ago, they've actually scaled up and had to find new venues repeatedly because of a couple things. First of all, they invite a photographer out to every single event, every single Wednesday, and they get those photos online and kind of get people excited to share where they were. Secondly, the kind of imagery and like thing that they're selling is a lot less about the music and a lot more about the connections and the great times and the love that's shared in the room that people are constantly looking for. And for me, when every Wednesday was coming around and I would consider saying like, oh, I'm a little tired, I don't want to go to this event tonight, even though I know that all my friends are going to be there. There was always that little bit of FOMO, that little piece of what could I be missing? What amazing new connection or person could I be missing out on meeting, or what great night could I be missing out on having? And if I didn't go, I knew that I'd be facing a whole lot of content the next few days of people having this really amazing time that I wasn't a part of. Again, we're kind of, for the music, I mean, you can very easily showcase a photo of a band playing, and you can kind of look at it if you weren't there and say, okay, like, they seem like they're pretty good. They've got some pretty nice instruments. Like, sure, that was fun. But a photo like this, where you've got kind of the human connection and the power, really tells me a lot more about what the night was like than maybe just a picture of some guy playing the trumpet. Again, so kind of family stuff. We could very easily showcase just like a kid smiling. But instead, we're kind of showing that connection, that great father-son moment of the two of them dressed up, having a really great time. And this is probably a moment that this kid's going to remember for a very long time. And being able to sell that to other parents and say, look at this great connection that you could have with your child if you come to our event, is going to be kind of the difference between getting someone kind of interested in what you're doing and making someone really feel like if they're not a part of it, then they're going to be missing out. This is also a really great opportunity to kind of associate your brand with these kind of great connections. So things like product placement, kind of associating what you're selling, whether that's maybe a beer or even just like ATV, for example, is a bank, but they've done a really great job of associating themselves with human connection and fun. And I think that's very, very evident in a lot of the imagery that they choose. The third one that I think is a really great way to kind of get people involved and really kind of harness that FOMO that we're talking about is to highlight joyful moments. So showcase really authentic moments that leverage human emotion and show your audience what exactly they're missing in terms of the amount of just intense fun that they could be having at your either event or by working with you. So, you know, just kind of showing smiling faces is always really, really great way to kind of showcase exactly what kind of event that you're hosting. You know, kind of like crazy fun, crazy insane moments, you know, somebody crowd surfing. I want people to look at that and say, wow, I should have been. Next time this band comes to town or next time this festival happens, I'm going to be the first one to buy a ticket. The fourth one that I think is really great, and this can kind of go for anything. It doesn't have to just be events, even though I know that's a lot of the examples that I'm showing, is to choose awe-inspiring imagery. So rather than just picking something that it could be kind of, you know, stock photography, if you can really find a unique moment or a unique angle that is going to really capture people's attention, you're going to really get them interested in what you have to offer. So a way that you can do that is to set up a photo shoot or like a branded photo shoot if you're kind of selling a product or an agency, and kind of create those kind of synthetic moments that are going to capture people's attention. If it's going to be live, if it's going to be at an event, or you're trying to get candid, you can kind of ensure that your team is ready to capture these moments. I would say that being over-prepared is never a bad idea, and creating a shot list in advance will always be really, really great and helpful. Another great way to kind of get this awe-inspiring image is to really focus on user-generated content from your audiences. So I would say that an example of this is Instagram stories. So this is, you know, you guys know how it works, right? So people can post their own photos, they can tag your account, and then you can kind of start to build that community of online contributors. That's going to make people on the outside feel like there are so many people involved and such a great community building that they'd like to be a part of. So as an example, kind of like choosing special moments that you know that kind of show that if you weren't there, you're not really going to fully get it. You know, little fun little things, little tiny little special details that are going to kind of create that wow factor and that magical moment. This was a really funny one. It was actually, they had a wiener dog race at this festival, and people loved it. And people look at these pictures and they now say, wow, did I seriously miss a wiener dog race? Like, how can I be a part of that? This also, so this is an example of kind of more of like a branded content. This is a little bit more kind of on the fringe, but I was working with some local musicians who were kind of trying to release some new music. And we had kind of a couple options. We could either A, just go to the studio and get a few basic headshots, or B, try to create some really kind of awe-inspiring, like wow moments that really show who they are as a group of artists. And since they took these pictures, people kind of look at them and they say, wow, I don't know what they're doing, but I know I want to be a part of it because they seem super weird and it's awesome. The fifth one, which I think is probably the most important, is to tell a story. So you really don't want to give your audience everything at once, especially when you're kind of rolling out a new brand. I think that building up a bit of hype is a really great tool, especially kind of in the age of FOMO. People are a little weird and they don't always want what comes easy to them, but if they feel like they have to work a little bit to be a part of what you're selling, then they might be a little more interested. So this idea of exclusivity, you know, you don't know what this is, but other people do. Another great way that you can do that is reach out to a few target people and get them to start posting stuff or little teasers before anyone else. So people say, wow, what is this? How can I be a part of it? Releasing a slow stream of content over time. And also, this is a great thing that I think is a really good example of this, is kind of putting an emphasis on a lifestyle that your audience can relate to. So brand photography, lifestyle photography can seem pretty basic, but ultimately what they're selling is this idea that you could have that lifestyle. If we look at brands like Mountain Equipment Co-op or Burton or Atmosphere, their photography and their website is all about showing people this kind of active dream lifestyle. And every time I go on social media or check out their website to like find a new pair of skis and I see this, it almost gives me this weird sense of FOMO, in the sense where I say, I love snowboarding, but I haven't been out. Or I love camping, but I've been out once this summer. But like, I feel like if I join this community, this could be the lifestyle that I have. And I could be like these people in these pictures, having an amazing time going hiking all the time, you know, doing backcountry camping, doing all these things that I like and have always wanted to do, but maybe haven't always really prioritized. So as an example of kind of building hype, I kind of worked with a group of artists recently, I would say back in January, and they wanted to kind of launch a brand new project. And what we decided to do was kind of roll out all these little teasers over time. And they kind of had this really edgy kind of thing. They had a logo that was the question mark and the exclamation mark. So we said, what if instead of announcing who you are right away, we just started posting these teasers, these small little bits of information over time. So that was what we did. So this was the very first thing that they all individually posted on their social media accounts with no captions. They got their friends to start reposting it. They got the friends of friends to start reposting it, until all of a sudden there was this weird movement of people who were sharing this. And those who were in the know felt like they had this really exclusive look and they felt really special. And they felt like, wow, I don't have FOMO because I'm a part of it. And those who didn't began to kind of feel a bit of that FOMO. They began to say, shoot, like I'm on the outside and I don't want to be. So I'm going to subscribe to these channels for updates. I'm going to kind of follow. I'm going to buy whatever they're selling because I want to be a part of this community of people. So we kind of went from that into posting some really kind of weird and kooky brand imagery that really kind of really aligns very well with their brand. But by the time that we were kind of posting these photos, they were linking to their new singles, they were getting ready to release music videos, they had already built up such a groundswell of support simply by kind of building up the hype and making people feel like they would be very, very special if they had kind of gotten involved early. So I'm getting kind of close to the end of my presentation, but I wanted to just touch really quickly on how you can kind of create copy that will inspire FOMO as well. So, I mean, there's nothing better than kind of posting a really great image with a really great piece of copy. And when they can work together to kind of leverage that FOMO, that's when you kind of are hitting the sweet spot. So using imperatives, don't miss out. You don't want to miss this. You don't want to don't sleep on this. Things like that are kind of going to make people feel like, oh, shoot, like I really don't want to miss out. Things like it's the biggest event of the year, or this is going to solve all your problems, or we've got limited time to work with our clients, but we want to work with you. We'll kind of take people into that space of feeling like they're very special and that they don't want to miss out. I would say using hashtags so people can start to kind of do that user-generated content that we talked about can be really great, as well as the use of live video. So kind of posting live stuff as it's happening in real time and saying, look what's happening right now that you could be a part of if you get on it really quickly. Highlighting missed opportunities as well. I think everybody knows how like kind of creating an early bird option for their tickets, or kind of discounts or deals for people that run out after a certain amount of time, and kind of give people the kick in the butt that they need. And like we talked about, showcasing exclusivity as well. So I wanted to finish with kind of just one of my favorite photos that I've taken in a long time. And when we talk about kind of that idea of creating, showcasing moments that people feel like they don't fully understand unless they were there, I think this is a really great example of that, because we kind of have this, you look at it and you say, wow, this looks really cool. But you don't fully know what's happening. And if you pair a picture like this with the right copy, you're kind of going to land in that perfectly sweet spot. So yeah, this was I know the time is limited and we want to get to questions, but I wanted to say thank you. I hope that this was valuable to you. I'm going to take some questions, and this is where you can find me on Instagram and my website. Yeah, so before we get to questions, I did actually set up a poll here. So if you go to polls, I'd really love to know from all of you, how do you source imagery for your projects already? So if you go to just the polls section, do you use stock photos? Do you hire a photographer? Do you take them yourself, or is there another thing? And if there is, feel free to pop it in the chat. And while you guys answer that, I think we can go on to questions. So yeah, thanks.
Hey, Claire. That was awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that we all learned stuff through that. Sorry, I'm just checking out the polls right now. I think we were all able to kind of learn some takeaways from that we can all apply to our events or anything else that we're doing. We do actually have quite a few questions that came in. So I'm going to jump into that, and then we can review the polls at the end. Awesome. So Francis asked, we're having so many events nowadays. For example, ones that people gather for a subject matter expert to discuss, kind of like we're doing now. How might these principles apply to online events?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And yeah, it's definitely a bit more of a challenge, I would say, for sure. But what we can still use a lot of these principles. And when we talked about kind of, I'm just going to go back to his main stuff here. One sec. When we talk about these 5 kind of core things, which is considering your audience, showing human connection, highlighting joyful moments, choose awe-inspiring imagery, and telling a story, those things are kind of evergreen, and you can apply those to really whatever it is that you're working on when it comes to content. And if it's online, like, sure, you might not be able to showcase some great picture of people holding hands and smiling and having a great time, but you can still kind of show this imagery of, maybe you go more towards the outcomes of the presentation. So if somebody's giving a webinar or an online event that's around, for example, the Communo networking events, maybe you can show imagery of an outcome of this event. So telling people the kinds of connections that they could make, telling people the kinds of clients that they could get, even telling stories of like success stories that come from the events that you're hosting online. And you can kind of source imagery from people, or testimonials, if you will, that will kind of highlight that value that it's adding.
Okay, I think those are really good points. I think that once all this is kind of, I won't say over, with all this uncertainty there is right now, I think that harnessing FOMO might be easier to do.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think we're all having a bit of FOMO right now.
Yeah, I think everybody's having FOMO, so like nobody's having FOMO is like how I'm talking about it a little bit. Like we're all missing out, but at least we're all missing out together. But I think like there's still the FOMO of like, I don't want my business to fall behind. I don't want to be missing out on opportunities for growth just because of COVID. So if you can highlight those opportunities through your content of like how you can still be a part of these communities and add value, then like you're still going to kind of appeal to people's natural kind of FOMO of like not wanting to fall behind.
That's good. And actually that made me think of another question that kind of leads into another question we got here from Matt. So any best practices or fave tools for organizing a media library / calendar for a slow drip of content over time? And then to add on to that, my point is, what do you think about how brands or companies should be posting about their previous events during COVID when they're not able to have them?
Yeah, so both very good questions. I think I'll start with Matt's because that's a little easier to answer. But I think that in terms of favorite tools, for sure. So it really depends on what you decide is going to be the way that you want to get content out. And as we know, that's going to be very, very different depending on your audience. So there are things like, obviously, like email campaigns and newsletters, or kind of digital events, websites, etc. If we're talking about social media, for sure, I think scheduling things pretty far in advance, if you kind of know what's coming, is really great, because you can get a sense of the full story that you want to tell. So if you're kind of ad hoc deciding like, hey, I better make a post, I should post it right now, it's going to feel a little disjointed. Whereas if you say like, okay, so our event is in 2 months, or our launch of this product is in 2 months, how can we kind of tell a story and kind of build hype over time for that slow drip? Then, like we said, build a slow drip of content over time. I think the very first thing to do is actually just kind of get like what I always do is just put a pen to paper and kind of start to map out the story that I want to tell. And I'll typically work backwards from launch day. So if I say like launch day is February 30th, for example, I'm going to start there. I'm going to say, this is what people need to know by this date. And then I'm going to work backwards from there. So I'm going to say, okay, so a week out, they should know this. 2 weeks out, they should know this for sure. Maybe a month out, we want to launch pre-sale or early bird or whatever it is for this product, or this whatever it is, or a beta, or whatever it is that you're selling. It honestly doesn't really matter. And then from there, we can say, okay, so if we're selling tickets on this day and we're launching here, a month before, we can kind of start to do that mapping of that content. So in terms of a best practice, I would say definitely kind of work backwards from where it is that you need your audience to have all of the information. In terms of tools, I think there's a lot of different kind of scheduling tools, and it's really up to you because there's so many great ones. For social media, I've been using something called Buffer, which is really great because it's a little more affordable than tools like Sprout. So definitely check it out if you're looking for like kind of a good calendar tool. And what I really like about it is you can put a bunch of different accounts and kind of see the story over time as it's going to look holistically across your accounts.
Awesome. Kind of regarding that, we had
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I was going to maybe before you answer that one, we had another question come in from Lucas. He says that he's starting a brand new event series that no one knows about. How can he make sure the first one is a success when he can't create FOMO from past events?
Totally. That's a really good one. I think that you can kind of use other things that are happening in the community as like case studies or examples. Also, obviously, if you don't have access to really good imagery because you haven't done it before, that's when setting up a shoot can be a really great tool. So reaching out to a photographer or an art director and saying like, this is what we want to communicate. Like, can we do this? If your budgets are a little smaller, I think like stock photography, or even someone like Unsplash, where it's all free, kind of free licensed photography, is a great place to kind of still create that wow factor through your imagery. Especially, and I would say the second thing is like, when you're starting something brand new, your copy is going to be the most important thing that you can possibly do. So really give a lot of thought to what it is that the value add of your event is, and write from the perspective of your audience. So rather than saying like, what I often try to do is say like, instead of saying, I'm hosting an event, we're hosting an event that does this and this and this, say, you want this, this, and this. You want to learn how to do this. This is the answer to all of your problems, right? So kind of really approaching people, also kind of connecting with communities of people that already exist online can be really helpful. So rather than just kind of putting things out into the void and hoping for the best, or even doing paid promotions, kind of reaching out to existing communities, like Communo is a great example of that, and relying on your connections that you already have in the industry and saying like, hey, would you mind promoting this? Would you mind giving this a share on your LinkedIn? I know that you know a lot of people, and kind of building up a bit of that trust, and people will, if they think, if there's like someone who's trusted in the community for marketing and you send them your event and they're posting about it, chances are people are going to believe that your event is going to be really good.
Right. Awesome. And that actually, the questions, the way these all came in, are kind of perfect segues to one another. So we had another question. You were just talking about using stock photography when hosting a new event. So the question, do you approach other photographers to use their images in your marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that like when it comes to photography, it's very similar to lots of other kind of areas of expertise, in that it's a very broad, an insanely broad kind of medium. And someone who's doing really great portraits might not be someone who's going to do really great product photography, for example. So like for me, I'm always looking to see what other like kind of artists or photographers are working in the space that we might be able to collaborate with. And definitely if I see a great image, kind of being able to license that photo for whatever we're using, like always kind of being open to that is definitely a great idea. So I mean, obviously as a photographer, I try to say like, if I can do it, I would prefer to do it because I want to be involved in the project, but I'm definitely not afraid to reach out and to the community, or even Communo is perfect for that, and say like, I might not have the exact skills for this or the exact images that I'm looking for, but chances are, you know, the internet is a very big place and you can probably find what you're looking for pretty easily.
Totally. I kind of have a personal question for you. So what advice would you give to someone who's kind of getting into photography, who might not have all of the experience and all of the photos at hand, but they're like, I know I can shoot this event perfectly and I'm the best person to do it?
Totally. That's a really good question. And it's funny because I kind of definitely made my way into the world of photography just by like being very earnest and being 15 years old and saying, I want to do this. So I'm going to work my butt off and try. And I would say the biggest thing, especially in terms of events, and it's a bit unfortunate because it's a very competitive industry, is to not be afraid to volunteer first and foremost to build up your portfolio. So that was kind of what I did a lot when I was kind of in high school and my like kind of early adulthood through university. Was I would reach out to festivals, reach out to different things. Calgary Folk Fest is a really great organization that is entirely volunteer run. So you're not going to get paid ever, no matter how good you are, but it's such a great community. And when you start to work with people and they know that you do good work and they know that you're good to work with, you're going to kind of build up not only a great portfolio, but also the connections and the word of mouth that you need. So just as like a kind of a fun fact, I would say as a photographer, close to 100% of the work that I get is word of mouth. So showing up and being professional, running your shoots really well, and also just being personable and being nice and kind of being like ready to collaborate with other people is going to be your biggest asset, because as soon as somebody knows that there's a photographer in Calgary that's great to work with, they're going to recommend your name to a million other people. So just kind of getting out there and not being afraid to kind of put your name forward and say like, hey, I really want to shoot this. I don't have a lot of experience, but I'm willing to work for free or assist for free, is a great kind of starting off point if you're just getting into the industry, for sure.
No, I think that's a great point. Sorry, if anyone else has any more questions, please send them in now. But as you were kind of just talking about, it really is all about the connections and who you know and making yourself personable. And Claire is a Communo member, and we just want to, if you want to join the community and make connections, we just have a little offer on the screen here, and you can just join for free there. Make connections. You can connect with Claire on there and discuss potential projects. Doesn't look like we had any more questions come in. Let's just look at the poll. So it looks at the most common response for how people source their imagery is stock photos. What are the pros and cons to using stock photos rather than hiring a photographer?
Yeah, so I mean, the pros being that it's going to be a much more affordable route for sure, and you can still get some really great imagery. The cons, and I can't tell you guys how many times I've seen this, is that you're probably going to end up with, unless you're doing some intense digging, very similar stuff to what the other millions of people that are using stock photography are looking for. And it's funny that you mentioned this. I actually recently, the other day, saw like a brand new startup that's launching in Calgary. And they've obviously, as we would as a startup, because you don't have a lot of money and you want to make your investment last as long as possible, they used a lot of stock photos. But I don't think anybody really did a lot of due diligence, because they were using very similar stock photos to stuff that 2 other startups in Calgary are already using that I know that I've seen over time. So that's when you kind of, if you're going to use stock photography, I would say make sure that you're looking around and making sure that you're kind of finding stuff that's unique. Going to websites or stock sites that aren't kind of the standard one can be really great for that. So yeah, it's cheap and affordable. You might not have the most unique stuff and you might not get exactly what you're looking for. You know, like there's a lot of stuff on stock, but you may not find the exact person doing the exact thing that you want. So being able to take kind of photos as you go, hiring a photographer for a shoot, or even getting candid stuff of kind of your space or what you're working on can be kind of a great way to supplement that.
Yeah, I definitely think it would be hard to create FOMO or create interest over something when 6 other companies are posting the same photos.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah. And like, I think of the online space right now as just kind of like this digital vacuum where like there's so much content that we're like basically numb to it. And like we just are programmed to endlessly scroll, unfortunately. So if you can kind of cut through the noise by showing people stuff that's really unique, you're already going to be like leaps and bounds ahead of your competition.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to leave our folks on the call with. It's just that there is so much noise and there is so much content being produced by a million different brands every day that like you need your content to stick out if you want it to be successful.
Totally.
Awesome. Well, I think we're going to call it there as we are out of time. But thank you so much, Claire, for joining us today. And to everyone on the call, be sure to connect with Claire. And we're just going to pull up her slide again with her contact information. So yeah, connect with Claire. She is a community member. You can connect with her on Instagram and through email. Okay. Awesome. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Claire.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope you all gained something from this. And I hope that we can all very soon be in the same room because I missed your faces very much. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Bye-bye.